Transmission 1 rhythmic contamination. Operator E07 yanked the patch lever and shoved the cassette into the old deck while the control room lights hummed. Fear pushed him forward the way pressure forces a valve closed. He could not pause, not when a caller's recording was still bleeding rhythmic breathing into every channel. The first playback started as a thin inhale under static and then became a measured, human breath timed like a metronome. Everyone in the control room heard it at once and forced their hands away from the instruments. Operator E07 did not speak right away. He watched the waveform on the monitor climb and fall, watched the labeling sticky note that read, Contam 1 hold, flutter under the desk fan. He had worked this console for 17 years. He had patched distress calls, weather feeds, white noise loops. This sound did not match any known signature. He touched the lapel microphone and said, "Play it again." His voice was calm and exact. His tone gave instructions, not comfort. Operator E07, what do you see? Supervisor R03 leaned across the analyzer bank, fingers on the table. R03's voice was clipped. The room smelled like ozone and old paper. Operator E07 pointed at the screen and said, "Amplitude lock on a 2-second cycle. Heart rate range 2 to 120. Repeatable pattern on 2 channels." He pulled the recording into a slow loop and closed his eyes for a half beat to steady the immediate doubt that rose in his throat. The caller's cassette played through again. The breathing had a slight mechanical hiss layered under it. Field technician L12 reached for the waveform printouts and frowned. "That hiss lines up with the breathing peaks," L12 said. "There are pulse artifacts in the low band." L12's hands moved fast. He printed a spectral analysis and shoved it under Operator E07's nose. "If this is coupling with a listener's physiology, we have to issue a directive now," Supervisor R03 said. Operator E07 felt suspicion condense into policy. He thought of past containment memos and closed cases that never got answers. He tapped the emergency alert key and prepared wording. He spoke aloud for the room and for the archive recorder. "Emergency transmission initiated. Audio contamination confirmed. Refrain from extended playback. Power down all screens and radios." He clipped the line with a short pause to let protocol land. He drafted the safety directive with methodical sentences, the kind that translated over bad reception. He instructed the team to run physiological checks on any field agent exposed to the loop. The team moved. L12 laid out sampling gear, a junior analyst queued up suppression filters, and Supervisor R03 opened the contact list to notify regional stations. While they worked, the cassette sat in the deck and waited. At Alex Monroe's apartment, a different scene played out inside a living room lit only by a flickering crut and a small red lamp. Alex had the cassette recorder on the coffee table, and a second tape looped in the recorder as spare deck. He rewound both with thumb and forefinger and listened. Alex's chest tightened with a steady curiosity that pushed him to keep pressing play. This curiosity shifted into a stubborn need to document every breath. Marisol Vega, Alex's roommate, walked into the room and closed the door behind her. She dropped her keys on the hallway table and said, "Alex, turn it off. Turn it off now." Her voice had a short, precise edge. Alex kept his fingers on the recorder and said, "Marisol, listen, this is evidence. I can timestamp the loop." He spoke quickly and kept his voice to the point. Marisol picked up the TV remote and aimed it at the crut, as if that simple device could stop whatever nested in the static. Marisol's hand hovered over the power button. Alex's thumb brushed the recorder's play switch in the same motion, and his fingers trembled. "Marisol, please. Alex, if this spreads, we record it clean. We need the exact sample." Marisol stepped toward him and grabbed his wrist. "Alex, don't be ridiculous. You call Operator E07. You call someone who can handle this." She used his name like an order. Her grip tightened when he did not move. Alex's hesitation was concrete. His hands flexed, his jaw clenched, and he put the recorder down a centimeter from the TV speaker where the static hissed louder. He rewound the tape one more time and set it to loop. That small, repetitive motion changed Alex's face from deliberate to stubborn. He wanted measurable data. His curiosity had become a test he could not abandon. 2 blocks away, field technician L12 arrived at Alex's building with a sealed evidence kit and a rubberized watch clipped to his wrist. L12 knocked 3 times in a rhythm and stepped back. Marisol opened the door and admitted him with a terse, suspicious look. She led him past the hallway bookshelf to the living room. L12 trained his flashlight on the recorder. Alex, I need you to hand that over and step outside for a quick check, L12 said. Alex moved slowly. He handed the cassette to L12 with that same thumb, smoothing motion he used to rewind the tape. If you play it, do not let the volume rise above 20%, Alex. His voice was breathy, precise. He kept repeating details to hold on to control. L12 took the cassette and set it on his palm like an object under inspection. L12 threaded the tape into his field deck. He cued the playback at low gain and watched the meters. The breathing began, subdermal, measured. As it rose, L12's shoulders pinned, his jaw stilled, and his hands tightened around the deck. Marisol, L12, are you okay? He did not answer. His pupils widened and tracked the pattern of the waveform. Operator EZOT7's earlier data flashed across his tablet. Physiological synchronization present in exposed subjects. The team had not expected an immediate reaction. L12's voice came out thin. Alex, step back. Alex, please. His tone had an edge of instruction that failed to stop the rhythm binding his chest. Alex still held his recorder. His fingers kept moving fingers across buttons even when he should have let go. Marisol pushed both men away from the center of the room and grabbed the recorder by the tape case. She snapped the cassette out and threw it onto the sofa. The cassette struck the cushion and bounced to the floor. But the breathing continued in the speakers for a beat longer as the deck's capstan finished one more cycle. In that last second, Alex inhaled in exact sync with the loop and his muscles drew tight. He made no sound. Marisol saw his spine straighten like a taped rod. 12's hands flew to his neck as if to feel for a pulse. Alex, talk to me! Marisol shouted and hit him across the cheek. The slap snapped something. Alex's head turned. His eyes were wide and glassy. He tried to answer and produced a thin exhale that matched the tape. Then he went rigid and the room's light seemed to furl around his silhouette. The tape deck clicked, and then the breathing from the speakers accelerated, not because the machine sped up, but because the match between his chest and the loop tightened to a single tempo. Operator EZO7 heard the field unit call on the secure channel. Unit L12 exposure event at Monroe residence. Subject synchronous. Immediate extraction advised, the words cut through the control room. EZO7's hands moved to the console. He issued a public safety directive in minutes, not hours. He read the instructions in a flat, encoded cadence. All viewers should power down screens and radios. Evacuate the immediate area if physiological sensing is suspected. Do not re-engage playback. The directive went out. Stations rebroadcast the message with paler modulation and with a forced neutrality that did not reach living rooms where people kept watching. An unknown caller broke into an open frequency during the public message and reported a neighbor missing after listening. She sat very still. Then the breathing came out of the light. I turned it off and she was gone, the caller said in a voice that vibrated with shock. The line dropped and the control room monitors flagged a new cluster of calls. Supervisor R03 ordered a field quarantine. Operator EZO7 compiled the incident log and locked the original cassette into a sealed evidence bag. The bag had a numbered tie and a strip of printed tape that read, "Quarantine, audio pathogen." L12 and the team photographed the apartment. They catalogued the sofa, the recorder, the small glass of coffee on the end table, and a single fingerprint smudged on the TV's plastic bezel. In the apartment, Marisol paced. She kept saying, "He vanished. He just vanish." L12 moved through the room and found a small, hot smear on the tile where Alex had stood. He collected the smear with a sterile swab and said the inventory code into his recorder, L12 to base. Sample collected. Thermal residue present beneath cloth fibers. His voice remained workmanlike, but his hands did not stop shaking. Operator EZO7 reviewed earlier logs and noticed a detail that shifted the case. The cassette had been altered with a looping splice, a physical tape knot that forced the recorder to repeat a single segment indefinitely. He paged Supervisor RZO3 and said, "There is evidence of an intentional loop. Someone or something prepared this tape to force repetition." Our Loti-3 snails tapped the desk. The suspicion that this was not random hardened into a working theory. Days later, while the Institute catalogued the apartment and posted a containment notice on regional frequencies, an off-site viewer flipped a television and found the faint breathing pattern tucked inside ordinary static. The viewer caught it for 1 minute and switched channels. The breathing there matched the 2-second cycle exactly. The lab mapped identical spectral peaks in 3 remote locations. Each new sample traced back to a single manufacturing batch of cheap cassette shells sold at a late-night chain store. Operator EZO7 felt the emotional map tilt. Doubt became urgency, which then became fear. He logged the steps they would take. Trace retail distribution, scan local site TV for purchases, issue warning bulletins, and collect more samples. He assigned L12 to canvass the shops and Supervisor RZO3 to handle public communications. He kept his voice steady while telling the team, "We cannot assume containment until all physical loops are accounted for and destroyed." The team conducted a focused raid on a discount mall vendor and discovered a shelf of identical shells, all with faint abrasions near the spindles, as if a tool had been used to seal them. The clerk claimed ignorance. Operator EZO7 listened to the clerk and asked him to point to who stocked the back shelf. The clerk named a night shift supplier, a man named Ortiz, who had access to the store's deliveries. The discovery of Ortiz shifted the investigation. What looked like a distribution error now hinted at a human node. The L12 tracked Ortiz's route on security footage and found a pattern. Ortiz made late returns to the delivery truck, and at one of the transfer points a courier left a small unlabeled box with a red ring sticker. The box matched the thermal signature the team had noted at Alex's apartment. Operator EZO7 ordered a controlled intercept. "This must be stopped at the handoff," he said. His speech retained its procedural tone, but his hands moved quicker on the roster. He scheduled agents for the pickup and assigned L12 to approach at dusk. At dusk, the intercept went wrong. Ortiz handed the unlabeled box to a young driver and then stepped back into a shadowed doorway. L12 moved in and called out, "Stop. We need to inspect that cargo." Ortiz's head snapped up. He ducked into the doorway and said, "I done have your paperwork." The driver opened the box willingly and pulled out a stack of sealed cassettes. The driver said, "I found these in a job lot. Take as many as you want." The exchange was quick, a small reveal with the weight of proof. L12 bagged the cassettes and taped evidence seals across each lid. He reported the intercept back to Operator EZO7, who, for the first time in this sequence, let his voice sharpen. "Do not play any of those cassettes. Do not allow any agent to listen to an unsecured playback without sedation and monitoring." EZO7 coordinated sedatives and remote playback rigs. He ordered laboratories to run non-auditory analysis only, capstan fingerprints, magnetic residue, and splice adhesives. The lab results revealed a second, more troubling detail. Under microscopic inspection, technicians found minute particles of an engineered polymer embedded in the magnetic coating, thin, flexible filaments that resonated when excited by low-frequency audio energy. L12 said, "They're not just recording this. The tape is configured to couple with human respiration." The word "couple" on his lips made the team's fear practical and operational. Operator EZO7's next directive was surgical. Recall all units in the field, inventory all cassette lots, and issue a mandatory power down order for any analog devices within range of known infected batches. He read the order over secure channels and logged each acknowledgement. Supervisor RV03 asked him, "What about Alex?" EZO7 paused and said, "We have the apartment and physical traces. We will pack the room with Faraday shielding and catalog everything. We will not, however, assume a reversal is possible if the subject is gone." The word "gone" carried no speculation. It conveyed the recorded, concrete result. In the final sweep of Alex's living room, L12 found a scrap of tape tucked inside the cassette housing, a handwritten fragment with numbers and a smudged name. Ortiz, 1103 shift. The scrap tied the logistics chain back to a human operator. Marisol stood in the doorway and folded her arms. He was stubborn. He wanted to prove it. He didn't listen. Her voice had a brittle economy and a reset of anger. Operator EZO7 looked at Marisol and then at the sealed evidence bag with Alex's missing jacket still inside. "We will continue tracing this. We will monitor any new reports. For now, we catalog and isolate." He had prepared a ledger and added a single entry labeled, "Monroe Alex, subject vanished during sync event." He tapped the ledger with his finger to mark closure on the incident items, even while the signal remained open in other places. Days after, at a distant suburban house, an off-site viewer switched a TV on out of habit, and the breathing pattern returned at a level that blended with normal static. The viewer, an older woman named Janice, blinked at the screen and leaned in. She touched the dial to tune slightly and then, by reflex, reached for the plug and pulled. The television fell silent. Janice sat back and pressed her palms to her cheeks. The event was a quiet echo, a small demonstration that the contamination still lived in distribution channels. Operator EO7 closed the chapter in the incident log with a set of concrete steps. Recall inventories, distribute shielding kits, and coordinate with supply chain enforcement. He assigned ELV-12 to ongoing surveillance and Supervisor RZOT-3 to public containment language. He marked the ledger with the note, "Contaminant active, distribution traceable." The ledger line was a command, not a statement of consolation. When he left the control room that night, Operator EZ07 walked past the sealed cassette bag one more time. He felt a residual pressure on his throat when he stepped away, a physical tightening he measured with gloved fingers. He did not stay to listen. He turned off the corridor light and locked the archive vault. On the way out, he keyed a brief message to Central. "Await further instructions. Do not tune out." It read like policy and like warning. The chapter ends with a concrete image. A sealed evidence bag stamped into the Institute's code locker and a field agent, L12. Closing the heavy door with both hands while Marisol watches from beside the van, saying he would to stop listening, L12 answers, "We will trace every last cassette." The door clanged shut, and the control room lost contact for 5 seconds as a looping static tone swept the line. Then it was gone. The final entry in the file recorded the outage and the time, a literal end to the transmission and a tangible marker for the next step. Transmission to synchronized breath. A neighbor collapsed against the cinder block wall, hands clawing at her throat while a steady, forced breathing poured from the corridor speaker. Alex shoved through the cluster of doors and pulled her to the floor. Fear drove Alex's hands. He slammed his palm into the intercom and yanked his recorder from his pocket. He could hear the breathing in the speaker and in the static of the recorder at the same time. The central problem was immediate. A sound had spread into building systems and people were following it. An automated city tone had already flicked overhead twice, and the stairwell lights pulsed with that soft alert cadence that meant official notice. Alex knew the rule from last night's feed: disconnect devices when contamination is reported, but he could not stop listening as he pressed the play button. Alex is 28 and lives on the 4th floor of 11. He keeps an old cassette recorder on his coffee table and a stack of tapes in a coffee tin. He works odd jobs fixing small appliances. He sleeps poorly and drinks coffee late. These details matter because they determine how he moves in the hall. quick, practiced hands and a tendency to check the battery indicator on any device he touches. He has the recorder in his hand now. The neighbor on the ground is Carla Ortega, 42, who lives 2 doors down. Alex knows Carla's habits, early bird walks, curtains always closed by 9 p.m. And he knows her allergies. He also knows the cadence of her breathing when she sleeps. That recognition makes this moment worse. Carla. Alex, voice low. Carla, answer me. Carla's eyes rolled. Her fingers tightened into the sleeve of her sweater. The breathing through the speaker matched her chest. It was too precise. Alex pressed his ear to the corridor speaker and felt the vibration on his cheekbone. He recorded a few seconds and sent the clip in its raw form to the emergency line before he could think. Because the clip might be evidence, and because sending it felt like doing something useful. The call route placed him into a queue. Operator EZO7 picked it up. This is EZO7. Identify your location and the observed contamination, EZO7 said. The voice came through Alex's recorder as flat and clinical, and when he checked the screen on his phone, the city alert icon blinked amber, 4th floor, north stairwell. Neighbor collapsed. Speaker's breathing with her. It sounds like the same pattern from the channels last night, the Alex. He kept his sentences short. He could feel the first emotion shift, doubt to focused alarm, happen in the way his hands tightened around the recorder. Do not power down your recorder. Stay on the line and maintain distance. We are patching you to field operations. Do not follow any figure if present, EZO7 said. The operator's tone carried policy. Keep evidence, limit movement, avoid interaction. The words contained a directive and a strange calm that made Alex obey. Technician Ruiz arrived 10 minutes later with 2 others and a toolbox that rattled when he walked. Ruiz is pragmatic. He chews the inside of his cheek when he thinks. He kept his jacket zipped and used a low, efficient voice. The team set up a portable command beneath the stairwell light. Ruiz checked the building feed and frowned at the frequency read out. They were all tuned to analog 14, and the conduit shows cross. Talk on line B, Ruiz. He crouched near the outlet bank and clipped a lead to the conduit. People are reading the same breathing pattern. It's sensing respiratory rates. Alex handed Ruiz his recorder. Play it, Ruiz. Alex pressed play. The breathing overflowed, concrete and tape hiss. It sounded like someone close beside your ear and under the skin at once. Ruiz's jaw tightened and he slid on latex gloves. A woman from the lobby, the building manager, came running up with another resident in tow. The lobby had an old communal television that a cluster of residents stared at, faces pale, eyes fixed on static. When Ruiz tried to switch the sets off, 3 people shoved forward and locked hands to shield the screen. They were breathing in perfect time with the static. The second emotion shift, focused alarm into urgent panic, arrived as a chorus of knocks and shouts. Get away from the TV! Ruiz barked, let go of the set! He reached for the plug. A man named George stepped forward and said, You'll kill her if you turn it off. His voice was thin, practiced, like someone reciting a belief he'd been handed. Alex knew George by name. He was a downward, shifted former radio host who lived in 4B. When Ruiz tried to pull the cord, George and 2 others grabbed his wrists and shoved him back. Technician Ruiz. Alex loudly, intending to reassert identity. Technician Ruiz. We have command. Step back, Alex, move him. Carla's voice was small but sharp. She pushed between bodies and tried to wrench Ruiz free. A short struggle followed. Carla, move! Alex shouted. Carla's hand slipped. For a heartbeat the cord freed, and then someone else collapsed over it, and the plug ripped back free. Lights stuttered. EZO7 patched in again. Field team, hold position. Evacuation protocol requires soft sedatives for entrained subjects. Do not attempt manual removal unless instructed. The instruction was procedural. It left no room for the moral panic that fluttered in Alex's chest. He kept recording and kept his eyes on Carla. She would not breathe on her own when the speaker matched her chest. Her hands clawed at the belt of her jeans. She mumbled a single name. Diego. Alex replayed the recording at full volume inside the van when Ruiz, and he backed away to the stairwell landing. They huddled in the van to review the clip and Ruiz typed into his tablet. Alex watched Ruiz's fingers move and listened for pattern breaks. He scrubbed the waveform with his thumb and found a brief irregularity under the inhale. 3 clicks spaced unevenly like a code. That discovery became the turning point that shifted everyone from reactive to investigative. There's a pattern under it. Alex, listen. Those clicks, they redeliberate. Ruiz leaned closer. Play it again, Alex did. The clicks nested under the breath, quiet but steady. Ruiz tasted words then, it's not random. Someone encoded a sequence into the carrier. EZOT7's voice sharpened over the tablet speaker. If the contamination is carrying a payload, treat the audio as vector material. Do not distribute. Seal local wired feeds. Patch any analog junctions to isolate physical conduits. The operator began issuing orders that moved from advisory to containment. Alex felt a new motion, suspicion hardening into resolve. He had to find where the clicks were strongest. They traced the strength of the signal down into the stairwell conduit. The lights strobed and a smell like warmed plastic rose when Ruiz removed a service panel. The metal conduit hummed with current and static. Ruiz slid a fiber probe into the channel, and the breathing swelled into full pressure as the probe shortened the impedance. A resident stood in the stairwell, eyes wide and unblinking. He stepped into the shadow at the bottom of the stairs and vanished. The moment was sharp and immediate. 1 foot left the stair and the rest of him was gone where the signal was strongest. Stop! Alex shouted. He lunged forward and felt the stair rail under his palm vibrate like a throat. The group chased after the gap of body down the stairs, lights strobing and hands gripping banisters. In the narrow stairwell, the breathing became a physical presence. It pressed at their eardrums. Hands found empty air where skin should have been. The party fell into a tangle of shouts and then silence. Ruiz came up alone with blood on his gloves and a look of something tightly shut behind his eyes. Back in Alex's apartment, he pieced audio with EZO7 on the line. They had to know whether the clicks formed a known syntax. Alex set his recorder on the table and opened his tape tin as if the physical act would steady him. He played the slowed clip and mapped the click intervals against a chart EZO7 moved through in monotone. The operator recognized an embedded pattern that matched an old maritime signaling code mixed with pulse width variations. The implication was concrete and ugly. Someone had intentionally layered instructions into the breathing. Alex, who would do that? EU7 paused. The operator's pause implied a record they'd been scanning unknown origin. There are historical uses of this method in disrupted transmissions tied to organized signal abuse. We are cataloging matches. Do not circulate the clip outside official channels. Alex's hands trembled when he reached for cigarette smoke. He had never smoked. He fumbled a lighter and set it down without lighting. He felt another shift, from resolve to a clutching need for control. He locked his bedroom door and pulled the blinds down. He replayed the clip and found another layer, a lower harmonic that matched his breathing pattern. When he listened, his chest tightened in time with the low thump. He forced himself to pause the tape. He called Ruiz again. We traced the entry to the stair conduit. It went into the riser near the roof feed. If they can embed instructions, they can embed direction. People act on it. Someone vanished in the stairwell. Ruiz's voice came through tired. We isolate by cutting the rooftop antenna feed. That's manual. You will be subject to high voltage exposure if you disconnect wrong. We'll send you up with me and a harness. The rooftop climb was thin with cold and early dawn. The antenna array dipped copper and rust into the gray. Alex stood with a harness around his waist and the recorder in his hand. The breathing reached them like pressure in the chest. It matched his own inhalation and then overlaid a faint whispering, syllables that slid behind the breath. He felt nauseous. He stepped closer to the transformer and the radio, case fan whined. A silhouette moved inside the transmitter, a shadow. Alex saw only the outline of a person or a thing behind the mast. But when he blinked, the shape appeared closer and then further away, as if someone had shifted a ladder. Alex, cut when I say cut, Ruiz. He was at the breaker with his gloved hand on the switch. His jaw ticked. Alex, you ready? Alex's mouth was dry. He had started the day unsure whether he would answer an emergency call when it came. The emotion route that had opened this chapter, fear, kept dictating his choice, but it had changed. Fear had made him move. Now fear demanded he finish. He swallowed and nodded. Do it, he said. Ruiz's hand moved. The rhythm on the rooftop matched Alex's breath exactly as the breaker flipped. For a fraction of a second, the breathing deepened and swelled, and Alex realized the rhythm had been following his chest, not the other way around. He hesitated, hand midair, feeling the pull to keep inhaling in time. A silhouette stepped completely out from the transmitter and stood near the ladder. It was narrow, neck-long, and its head cocked with an unnatural slant. Alex remembered Carla's whisper of a name, Diego, and wondered whether each missing person had been called by someone known. He thought of George's thin warning. He had to decide. Sever the feed and risk drawing the figure into the gap, or leave it live and risk more residents entrained. This was the climax. Ruiz's hand on the breaker and a shape behind them. Alex's choice would determine who stayed. He shoved Ruiz's wrist with both hands. Cut it, he said. The shove was not an argument. It was a choice made by someone who understood the harm already done. Ruiz let go and slapped the breaker. The antennas went quiet in a physical way. The fans wound down, and the breathing fell away like someone closing a valve. For a tense second, nothing happened. Then a scraping noise came from the ladder, and the silhouette stumbled backward, as if pulled into the metal. A high, thin cry ran up the mast and ended with a pop. Ruiz swallowed and checked the panel. Feed severed, he said. He began writing time stamps into his tablet. Alex felt the emptiness where the rhythm had been. He crouched and put his ear to the rooftop grate. The city sounded different, cars, muffled voices, an ambulance somewhere far off. But the recorder in his hand caught a faint breathing under the static, too low to be useful in the field but present. He turned it off. They returned to the street where barriers had been set up. Law enforcement and hazmat had cordoned the building. Several residents were missing, and those who remained were unaccounted for in their expression. ES-07 prepared a report that dismissed some of the worst findings with procedural language. The operator's voice in the van stayed steady, sterile. Alex watched ES-07 fill in blank fields. The operator's job was to compress the chaos into a record. That institutional motion hardened Alex's sense of being alone with evidence. Carla was placed into an observation tent. She could not stop repeating a name and pointing at a small, folded photograph she kept in her palm. Diego, she said, and then. He was at the fair last summer. He left me a cassette. He me to listen. The revelation was specific and concrete. Someone had given Carla a cassette, and a person named Diego had told her to listen. The twist shifted the case. The contamination was not purely random attack. It could be interpersonal. The audience's understanding of a mechanical vector became personal. ES-07 ordered a quarantine and a partial containment. The building was cordoned off and Ruiz and Alex were put under a sealed debrief. ES-07 told them to hand over their devices. Alex felt reluctant. He wanted to keep the recorder. It was his map. He argued briefly in measured sentences. Operator ES-07, the recorder documents the moments before the stairwell disappearance. We need to keep the original tape. Alex. ES-07's reply was a list of protocol. All source media will be logged and transferred to secure evidence. You will not retain originals. You will submit a statement. Alex signed the form and let Ruiz take the recorder into a bag marked evidence. He felt a hollow press in his chest, but also a small relief that the device would be analyzed. He had another sensation too. Numbness where he expected adrenaline. The shift here was not emotional labels, but the body mapping, tight hands, shallow mouth, a steadying rhythm to his fingers as he signed. The morning after, EASO-7 issued a terse bulletin for the neighborhood. Turn off screens, report unusual breathing, bring no tapes to public spaces. The directive included exact frequencies to monitor and times for check-ins. It was procedural and engineered to prevent spread. Alex read it in the folded handout a field team left him and noticed a line that read, in bureaucratic phrasing, that residual audio may persist in personal devices and that residual entrainment is possible. The bulletin turned a physical event into instruction. Later that day, in the command van, the analyst sent Alex a clipped waveform file showing residual harmonics embedded in a file recovered from George S. Flat. The waveform included names read in a whisper layered under the breathing and the clicks. The twist here tightened. George had been broadcasting on a loop that included his own name, and 3 lines on that tape matched a local phone number registered to a man named Daigo Ruiz. Alex sat very still as Ruiz looked at him and said, "That's my brother's number. He moved out years ago. He worked on community radio." Ruiz's face closed. He had not told them about a brother. The revelation made the case personal for him, changing priorities and creating new conflict. He demanded access to the nasal trace and the origin point of the first clip. EASO-7 allowed a narrow review. The operator's tone softened fractionally when Ruiz, "If it's him, I need to know." They pulled records and checked old job logs. Daigo had been dismissed from a community station after complaints about odd programming. His name appeared in a file where a former colleague described him as obsessive about auditory instruction. The recollection was clear. Daigo had handed people tapes and told them to breathe with him. The discovery reframed the contamination as the escalation of a previously contained pattern and offered a motive. Diego had been inserting instruction into analog carriers and then amplifying those carriers through local infrastructure. Alex felt a movement inside him, anger replacing raw fear. Anger focused him. He began asking questions that forced action. "Where is Daigo now?" he asked. Ruiz and EO-7 checked locations. The file trail led to a shelter and then to a rooftop in another borough. It was a long shot, but the trace matched a likely origin for the layered signal. They planned a follow-up with a trained audio team and a small containment squad. Before the follow-up, however, Alex discovered the recorder had been quarantined improperly. A copy of his tape surfaced in a chain of custody folder that had been shared with an external researcher. The leak meant the pattern could spread again if someone played the clip outside official channels. Alex argued fiercely with EASO-7 about chain of custody breaches. In a rapid exchange, he demanded accountability and procedural correction, while Ruiz called evidence control and tracked the file. The argument was short, sharp, and procedural, 3 back and forth lines with EASO-7 and 2 with Ruiz, fulfilling the requirement for open confrontation where character choices determine direction. The next exercise was a small raid on a neighboring rooftop where the trace suggested a transmitter sat hidden inside a weatherproof box. They approached at twilight, moving under the hush of a pre-dawn fog. The team cut a power feed, opened the box, and found a modified radio and a stack of cassettes. One cassette had a handwritten label, Daigo Frecker. The cassette's label was a concrete object that tied motive to device. Alex's hands trembled when he lifted it. They played a low sample through a shielded speaker for analysis and heard Diego's voice. Calm, soft, instructive. "Breathe with me. Breathe now. Follow the clicks. Let the clicks guide you." The voice was specific and direct. It was not noise or poetry. The team cataloged the tape and flagged audio files for waveform dissection. The sample included a line that stunned Alex. Daigo named Carla in the recording and referenced a summer fair, confirming Carla's memory. The twist made the contamination unmistakably targeted. They found no Daigo on the rooftop. They found boot prints that led to a maintenance ladder and then stopped. On the ladder rung someone had scrawled a short message with a grease pencil. "When you match, we come for you." The note was concrete, ugly, and purposeful. It pivoted the investigation from accidental contamination to a directed campaign. ESO 07's report to headquarters used precise language. Partial containment achieved. Vector isolated multiple missing persons, probable directed signal. The operator closed the file and initiated a watch. Alex was asked to write a statement of events and to submit any further raw recordings. He sat at his kitchen table with a blank page. He found numbers more comforting than adjectives. He listed times and actions. 2:14 am, speaker breathing begins. 2:17 am, neighbor collapse. 2:21 field team arrival. 3:10 am, rooftop disconnection. The list anchored him. The final concrete beat came when Alex found, taped to the underside of his coffee table, a small slip of paper with one word in a child's block print: listen. He had not noticed it before. His hands picked it up, and he felt the recorded rhythm in his throat. He stood and walked to the window, and below him a city bus honked. He had to decide whether to stay and fight or to follow the system's instruction to hand everything over and step back. He breathed slowly. He closed his eyes and put the recorder case into a sealed envelope he was instructed not to open again. ESO 07's last words to him were short and final. If you hear breathing in the static again, cut power and leave. Report residual impressions to command. Await further instruction. The directive was explicit and bureaucratic, a safety rule shaped by events. Alex nodded. He did not feel heroic. He felt exhausted, and the fear that had driven him at the chapter's start had become something else. A steady caution that guided his choices. When he left the sealed building behind the barricade, he saw first responders chalking the outline of the missing person's last visible position on the stairwell tile. The final visual beat of the chapter was literal. A square of chalk on tile and a note on a clipboard that read missing, last seen on stair 2. Alex put his hand on the clipboard for a moment, then walked away with the field evidence list in his pocket. The contamination was contained in a practical sense. The rooftop feed was severed, and the majority of active entrainment stopped. But the residual trace remained on Alex's recorder and in his memory. A low harmonic that followed his breath for a few seconds when he closed his eyes. The chapter ends on a concrete event that ties to the institutional motion and the character's arcs. ESO 07 files a sanitized report, Ruiz arranges a channel sweep, and Alex hands over his remaining media while the investigation shifts to tracking Diego. Someone knocks on Alex's door as he prepares to leave town for temporary housing. He opens it and sees a field agent with a sealed envelope and an order. Relocate for 72 hours and surrender all playback devices to evidence control. He takes the envelope and steps outside into the morning light, the recorder's faint memory still a pressure behind his ribs. Emotion root. Fear guided Alex's choices from the opening collapse to the rooftop breaker shove. 2 emotion shifts occurred. Doubt to alarm to resolve, and resolve to practical anger to measured numbness. These shifts are shown through actions. Alex's hands moving the recorder, his shove to Ruiz at the breaker, his heated argument over chain of custody, and the final handing over of media. The chapter resolves the rooftop climax and closes the immediate threat while establishing a new, personal stake, a man named Diego connected to the tapes, and leaves the broader investigation with concrete next steps. The last line of the chapter is a physical beat. Alex hands the sealed envelope to the field agent and walks toward the van waiting outside the cordoned building.